The first time I heard your story, I was like, "Holy shit," blown away. And then this time, or last time I heard your story, it was more of like, I would say it was a lot more polished, but then it was also you're able to be more expressive with it and how you're able to help out other people and helping out the soft community and helping out veterans and how they've been a huge part of your life. And one of the areas that we just simply grazed over last time. So can you give me a little bit more like context about how your grandfather has helped you out and actually shaped you to become the man and courage that you have had to be able to share your story?
Yeah, in quite a few ways, like it wasn't him on his own. My grandmother was amazing as well. But man, first of all, like he loved my grandmother so much. Yeah.
But
So,
but anyways, I'll catch up with you soon. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
all right, brother. Have a good day, man.
You too. How you been, Paul?
Been well, man. Thank you for asking, Will. Doing well.
Last time we talked, I actually just released your episode not too long ago. We haven't talked probably about a month or
Yeah,
so,
it's been a
and
minute.
it was the feedback that I got was extremely raw. People had to listen to it several times, and it put a new perspective on what people go through.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's nice to be able to help people with my story. Feels good.
You are definitely a giver when it comes to it, and you still keep on giving. I have to say, it's actually been a blessing getting to know you a little bit more each time I get a chance to hear your story. The first time I heard your story, I was like, "Holy shit," blown away. And then this time, or last time I heard your story, it was more of like, I would say it was a lot more polished, but then it was also you're able to be more expressive with it and how you're able to help out other people and helping out the soft community and helping out veterans and how they've been a huge part of your life. And one of the areas that we just simply grazed over last time, I remember when I was going through recording, was your grandfather. You didn't really talk about him as much as you did the first time or the other times I met you, or I talked to you before. So, can you give me a little bit more, like, context about how your grandfather has helped you out and actually shaped you to become the man and courage that you have had to be able to share your story?
Yeah, in quite a few ways, like it wasn't him on his own. My grandmother was amazing as well. But man, first of all, like he loved my grandmother so much. Like he was such a solid example of like what it's like to treat a woman. And that wasn't something that I had growing up from my dad by any means. He was like the total opposite of that. And I didn't really get to witness that or soak it in as much as I did until I started like dating my wife, and starting to realize like, oh man, you did have a really good example of this. It just wasn't coming from where you would expect it. He treated her incredibly, man, like would always like wine and dine her, buy her really nice clothes, nice jewelry. And then those are like tangible things, right? But the way he talked to her, the way he looked at her, the way he loved her was like, you don't see that much anymore, like they come from a generation of people, like they went through the depression, they went through, several like World War II, World War World War III. We're not there yet. But
Soon,
yeah,
soon.
soon, Korea and all that stuff. So they came from a generation where they went without big time, like they lived in areas where they'd have to black the windows out at night and like the whole cities were blacked out because there was bombings were potential. And when things were broken and those days, like they fixed it, they didn't throw it out and get a new one, and that went all the way from like cars to the kids toys. Like they had 9 kids, so Christmas would come around and little Michael would get Eric's bike from the year before just with a new paint job on it, and that sort of stuff. So they just, when things were not good in their marriage or they had arguments, like my grandmother would just say to stay up and fight naked all night if you have to, you know, like don't go to bed angry, fix the shit so you don't wake up angry the next day. And it just it really set the bar for me, like, okay, this is how you're supposed to treat the woman you love. And the way that my grandmother looked at him was like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, man. Just like so many pictures I have, like when you see people posing with their couple, right? They're both kind of like looking at the camera. She's always looking up at him. You know, she was short, like 5 foot tall, and he was like 6'4", this big man. And she would always just be looking up at him, like with this, like, like a love that you just can't really describe. You kind of had to witness. Um, Go ahead.
It's just thinking about how you were talking about your grandparents and your grandfather was able to lead and your grandmother was able to follow. And it actually, even though it was that time and error, but it dealt with a lot of trust. And then the other thing I was thinking about in the back of my head about the conflicting view that you had about how your father raised you and actually raised you is I'm using the word loosely, or that phrase loosely.
Yeah,
And I do apologize about like using the verbiage like
don't
that,
worry
but
about it.
like having conflicting views of, hey, my grandfather's trying to show me this principle, and how my father was showing me these principles, and then going through and navigating.
It's like contrast, right? It's like you
Yeah,
see a positive and a negative. So I had like, okay, don't do this, right? And then you have this other example of like, man, this is what you're supposed to do. And I'd be lying if I said I love my wife always like my grandmother, my grandparents loved each other, you know, like that. Like I did pick up some negative habits from my dad. You know, I was very heavy into drinking and not abusive, but just fucking reckless and wild. And you know, you go through life and you grow. Hopefully you can grow out of those things. And I very much have. But just yeah, having the contrast of the two was like I think pretty important, at least for now I can say that, you know. But you say loosely like my dad raised me. I always joke that I was raised by wolves. And I'll hold the door for people and stuff. And it's kind of interesting how uncommon it must be because, you know, I've had several people say like, oh, you somebody raised you right, you know, and I just laugh like, man, you have no idea. Like I was not really raised by anybody because you know, I was in the system until I was like a freshman in high school.
you and I just even just talked about before. I said, how long have you been off of smoking weed? And you said about a month and a half. And I think about how much substances throttle down relationships, or they will either enhance or actually I'll even say throttle down even with MDMA. You don't really get a chance to know the person always. And having that ability to really think again, to reevaluate, like you said, like you didn't love your wife always the same way, but it sounded like even from when your child was playing with matches on the floor, and then how that actually sent you back to a certain time, and then each time that you're able to go through your different types of traumas or whatever emotional s- inflammation created, you're able to connect a little bit deeper with your wife and with your children.
Yeah, and I've been pretty connected, right? But like with weed, you know, like I've been on some sort of drugs or medication since I was 5 years old. You know, I have windows in between where I would not use anything, but nothing like of like real significance, like a long stretch. But like with cannabis, you know, it would numb out like the nasty shit. Like it really would have calmed my mind to a place where I'd be like, all right, this is manageable. Like I don't have like these racing thoughts, able to kind of stay like find a good baseline. But when I started with having kids and being a father, I realized that it wasn't just numbing out like the bad shit, you know, it was numbing out good stuff too. I wasn't able to be like fully present. So I've taken breaks here and there over the last 5 years. And then this time I'm just like, I'm so busy with life where I'm like, man, I can't, I can't afford to be stoned, you know, and I'm the kind of person that I'm not like, oh, I'll smoke a little weed before bed and kind of just like drop in and knock out. Like I'm an all day long kind of weed smoker. So it's been at the first it was a little bit challenging, but now I've kind of found like a baseline where I'm like, all right, this is manageable. There's days where I'm like, fuck, like like one little rip of weed would just kind of like really mellow me out and take the noise away. But I've been really focusing in on like doing breath work and make sure I'm getting in the sauna and stuff like that. It's been really helpful.
So, from our conversation that we had, I've and actually a lot of the conversations I've had with people on here, and then I took off about 3 to 4 weeks of drinking already. I don't have any intentions to start drinking to maybe 3 months from now, and if I do go back to it, it's I think about, like, you just said that you've been too busy. I think about when if I smoke cannabis the night before, how I wake up the next day, even though I just feel like I have, like, a weed hangover.
Hmm.
At least for me, I do. And same thing with alcohol, I have that hangover, and I'm like, I feel like I'm fighting up to get back to baseline. And each time that I actually try to get back to baseline, I get a little bit further each time, and it's just a little bit more of a catch up.
Yeah, it's like you look at people who are into hard drugs and then they like stop for a while and they relapse and they rinse and repeat that cycle, but every time they relapse, it's like 10 times worse than the one before, and I've found that with weed, like I've quit, quite a few times over the last 10 or 15 years. And every time I pick it back up, it's fucking that much harder for me to stop again. And then alcohol, like per molecule, per parts per million, you have to consume more alcohol than any other drug to feel the effects, right? So like if you take a look at, let's just say LSD is probably the most um potent of them all per molecule. It's like micrograms. Like you could take a tiny little drop and it blasts you to the moon. But for alcohol, you have to drink, a six pack to feel like any kind of buzz, and your body immediately processes that as like a toxin. As soon as it hits your system and starts digesting, like it's digesting into toxins. So, like, you have to consume more of it to feel any of the effects. And it's literally a poison and a depressant. But damn, it's
I
good.
agree. It is good, but the tolerance of it, like, I was finding out every roughly per person, it's is it 0.017 every hour that you are processing the alcohol. So even when you're sleeping, it's still the same thing. And how many people that build up tolerances might be driving to work still legally drunk
Yeah.
from the night before because their tolerance is so high. And it's it's so incredible about how much this strips away, like, even I'll say for me, cannabis and alcohol and other things have actually stripped away from me to be able to be extremely present, or it'll take away from what am I really feeling? What is the type of friction? What is the type of ability to try to connect to another person? Um, I've actually found over the years, like, hey, I would drink and have a stogie with somebody and trying to get to know them, but it's actually a false like dive in. It's like a jump into shallow, but then all of a sudden, it's like, do I really get to know them, or do I only get a chance to see a perception of them?
Or you're even going to remember, right? Like it clouds your memory, it clouds your judgment. Like you have a really meaningful conversation. And yeah, alcohol might have been the lubricant for that, but is it really meaningful if you're inebriated in some sense? The
Yeah.
times I find really hard for me to not drink or when I really crave alcohol is like in an airport where you have like nothing to do. You're anxious about getting on this plane, like, and it's like there's those $30 cocktails start to sound really tasty.
I totally get that. Like, I just right before we got on the call, I booked my graduation present to myself, and I'm flying out to Geneva, Switzerland to take a train over to France to meet up with a buddy for my graduation present that I gave to myself. to go skiing. And you're right, you go into the airport, they said it doesn't matter what time it is, it's okay to start drinking because 'cause you're in the airport, the rules.
Unless it's after 10. They close the bars at 10. You're like, fuck, it's 11 o'clock. I got a 2 hour layover. I can't even get a drink. But at 6
Yeah.
a.m., you could be sitting in a bar and it's like totally acceptable.
Yeah. So, going back to your grandfather and then also going back to how obviously being raised by wolves, like you said, the connection with your wife, how much has that actually also played an interest on how you've been able to help out men and other people and the again, you're not a therapist, but your therapeutic ways of helping people heal.
Um, well, the last things my grandfather said to me, like before he passed away, he had a stroke in like, I want to say like 2010, maybe somewhere around there. I'm not exactly sure what year he passed away, but he had a stroke and he like passed away from that like fairly quick, within like a week he was gone. And it started with his balance got, fucked up, and then his like cognition was bad, and then he ended up being like nonverbal and not able to speak. But the last conversation I had with him, he just told me to make sure I always took care of Kimmy. He's like, just you take care of that girl. She's a good one. Take care of her. And then he wasn't able to speak anymore. And he just he loved her so much, like treated her like a daughter, and just was so good to her that I feel like I owed it to her and him to like just be the best husband that I could possibly be. And it's taken a long time to get to a place where I'm like, okay, I'm proud of the husband and the man that I am. Like for a while you're just kind of in it. You don't necessarily think you're bad or like have, toxic traits, but then when you grow and you get to an area of through an area of growth and reflect back, you're like, "Oh man, I was not a really great person to her. I was always faithful, never abusive, but just fucking wild and reckless, and I put her through a lot of like unnecessary stress and shit." Um but he was always helping people out, like I said before, when at his funeral, it was like a giant church and there was like standing room only, like hundreds of people there, and maybe 50% of them family. And he just was always leaving people, places, and things better than when he got there. And I really think I picked up on that. But he also ruled with an iron fist. He was a tough love kind of guy. He implemented hard work. I remember being a kid and they had like a really nice property in Orange County with like a fairly big lot for that area, and lots of trees and stuff. And in the fall, he'd make me like, okay, go rake up all the leaves in the backyard. So I'd rake all these leaves up into a big pile and like get them like ready to throw in the trash or whatever. And I'd go, hey, all right, Dad, the leaves are done. Like, what do you want me to do with them? And he's like, spread them back out. It makes good dirt, and you're like, what the fuck, man? Like, I just spent hours raking all these leaves. What do you mean, spread them back out? And he'd say stuff like, "Oh, don't be a pussy. Like hard work, little hard work never killed nobody." That was stuff that he implemented into us. Or like, man, I remember one time there was like a stack of bricks in the yard, like a giant stack of bricks that we got from the neighbor. And he's like, "Hey, I need you to move this stack of bricks." And it's like, he just made me move them like 5 feet away, but like all day you're moving bricks. Just cause like I feel like he saw like you had downtime, and an idle mind is a devil's playground. So he's like, I'm gonna find this kid something to do, and he just was such a hard working man. He had 9 kids, 5 girls and 4 boys, and he wasn't always a great father and a great husband. He was a heavy drinker. He after getting out of the Marine Corps, I think, he said he learned how to drink in the Marine Corps. And yeah, and my grandmother gave him an ultimatum, like, "Hey, if you don't quit drinking, I'm gonna leave you." And he never drank a drop of alcohol again. So he was like extremely dedicated to his family.
So when you were talking about raking out the leaves, and I was remembering that your grandfather was a Marine,
Hmm.
we used to send out young Marines outside to go mop up the rainwater while it was raining.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
Or actually take like it's it was just like I'm just thinking about the games that they played, and it's like you're right. Idle hands do the devil's working. You think about like why are we doing this? What kind of discipline is this? What is the kind of direction? Why this just sounds so asinine. And you're like, ah, there's a reason. He's making me earn my keep.
Hmm.
He's helping me understand that even though this might sound so stupid, but there's a reason, there's a purpose behind it. And having 8 or 9 kids or having that big of a family, then taking on additional responsibilities is never easy for somebody. So kudos to your grandfather and your grandmother.
Yeah, I used to always think he was like unappreciative or, oftentimes like an asshole, like you go mow the lawn and in my eyes it looked great, but he would always find something that you missed, something that you didn't do right, and I just for my whole it wasn't until after he passed away I was watching that movie American Sniper. And there's a scene in that movie where the dude is like on the range and he's just like his groups are tight, man. Like everybody else is missing their targets and he's just like fucking like nailing them in there, like full on tack driver. And the instructor goes up behind him and he's watching him and he's like, he says something like, keep those groups tight. Like, keep your groups tight, Kyle. And I'm like, damn, like, even though he was doing good, like, better is the enemy of best, right? Like, you can always do your best, and there's always room for improvement no matter how good of a job you do. And that was the lesson my grandfather was trying to teach me my whole life that I just thought, fuck, man, I can't do anything right. Like, everything I do is wrong, no matter how good of a job I did. Like, I just would I'd miss the bar by just a little bit every time and I don't think that I ever did in his eyes, but he just wanted me to know that there's always room to do better. And he probably learned that in the Marine Corps.
You definitely learned something in the Marine Corps, and honestly, shooting is definitely part of it. But the fact is you could be so squared away, so spot on, like, but you can miss an Irish pennant. Are you familiar with that phrase, Irish pennant?
Mm-mm.
So if you think about like your shirts, they might have like these little stragglers on it, like little cloth pieces of cloth. And I used to hate this. Like I was the shittiest garrison marine, or one of the shittiest garrison marines. And you would take out your dress shirts and also your undershirts, and you would flip them inside out. And you have to cut these little pieces of fabric off of it, like the strings. And then you would have to like melt them so that they have no chance to fray. And you would think like, why do they care about the inside of my shirt? Why are they trying to hit me on something? And this guy that I really respect, his name is Michael Suskin. He was my platoon sergeant over in Iraq. And when he became the company first sergeant, actually, no, the company guns, he went into the our living area. And what they would do is that we'll take the rug or the mat, and then we'll sweep underneath it, and you hit you. But for him, he used to be a former drill instructor, and how anal retentive he was, and he wanted to show everybody he was in charge. He went into underneath the sink, opened up the cabinet, went behind where the pipes are, and he hit it, and he was like, "Oh, that's one piece of dust." He would take the window, slide it over, open up the other one, and then catch it on the railing outside. That's 2. Like, take off the light bulb, and then underneath the light bulb, you have some dust in there. He's like, "3, alright, redo your whole room." And it was, like, nuts like that, and you would think, like, he just lifted up the carpet. He went behind the sink, and it's just like, there's always room to be able to improve your ability to grow. What is something that you might miss? What is something that you might not see? What is all these other areas. But at that time, when I was 20 years old, 21 years old, I'm like, this guy has all the power in the world just to screw with us.
Hmm.
But now, fast forward, he was my platoon sergeant over in Iraq, and we're traveling down the roads. But before we start traveling down the roads, we start looking about how do we pay attention to wires? How do we pay attention to just these little things that are off? Like, and you become super hyper vigilant because if you're not paying attention just for these random strays, like there was a place that was called MSR Long Island, and they had clear tubes where they had water. And what they would do is that when you roll over it, it would increase the water pressure and then add to the connection between the battery and the charge, and it just caused an explosion. So you're looking for everything and things that you think that you wouldn't even be paying attention to while you're driving 40 miles an hour down the road. You have to be observant. So I respect your grandfather for doing that. But to me, I also find it super funny because I remember the shit that I've been through.
Yeah. My grandfather, like, up until, he was his dying day, like his shirts were always pressed. His shoes were always shined, like I would shine his shoes for him, and I learned how to do that at a very young age, like legit spit shine. And he would wear, like, most often, like the shoes you wear with your blues, the shiny black, you know, uh
Mhm.
dress shoes.
Core frames.
Yeah, he would wear those. Like, those were his everyday shoes that he would wear with pressed slacks and an iron Hawaiian shirt, and clean shaven every day, always a slick haircut. Like, you know, you get older, like you think you're retired out of the Marine Corps, and like those habits never left him, and it was really when I turned 18, my buddies were all like, and not all of them, but a lot of them were like enlisted in the military. And I remember one of my really good friends, Jim, was like getting ready to join up, and we're kind of having a conversation about, is that a route that I should take? And I'm like, bro, I feel like I just did 18 years in the Marine Corps. Like, the last thing I want to do is, like, between living in group homes and all the system and then my grandfather and stuff, I just felt like I just found my freedom, and I don't want to. It wasn't for me, and looking now, I'm like, fuck, dude, I'm 40 years old. My buddies are 40 years old. They're all retiring, sweet pensions, fucking sick disability package, same amount of PTSD. I'm like, man, maybe I should have gone in the Marine Corps, but I don't have any regrets other than maybe a little hint of jealousy seeing these guys like, you know, retired at 40 is pretty freaking cool.
The thing that they don't usually talk about, and I see this in my job, you see people get the 100% disability P&T, permanent total. And the area that is not usually spoken about is that so many of these guys lose purpose in life, lose identity with life. It's like, as much as we want to say we have evolved, we still are a lot of times basing ourselves off of our productivity, how much money we're making, what are we doing? Because like if I say, "Hey Paul, how you doing?" and you're like, "Oh, good, man." And I was like, "What do you do for work?" Because usually that's one of the first ways people introduce themselves and had a label. "Oh, I'm 40 years old and I'm retired." You don't think about getting a second job? Nah, I'm retired. What do you do? I just kick it. I do whatever I want. It's like,
I'd be like,
and
sweet, dude, congratulations, man.
but like, are you volunteering? You doing anything else? Nah, nah. So what's going on? Like, you could just tell, like, the more that you pry or the more questions you ask, you could just tell that the person's losing their purpose and their identity, and they're just existing in time periods where everybody else is like waking up to have a reason to get out of bed instead of actually just being able to get after it or looking at a little bit more.
Yeah, that question of like, what do you do for a living? Man, it almost is like, I don't like that question. I don't like being asked that question. I don't like asking that question right off the rip. You know what I mean? I feel like it's a way to that men use in general to like size somebody up. I like to ask what people like to do for fun. like what do you do for fun? But I do agree with what you're saying about having purpose, especially, after a career in the military. I have a friend that just retired 3 days ago. The first was his last day, and he retired as an E9 in the Air Force. So he's been in leadership for the better part of, the last 15 plus years, and, did a 25-year rip in the Air Force in their special operations community. And he is like, I'm like, well, so what are you going to do now, dude? He's like, oh, I'm going to take this job at the Guard. I'm like, you just retired and you're going to re-enlist to go to the National Guard, He's like, yeah, the project sounds cool. And he explained the project to me and the operation they wanted him to work with. And I'm like, it doesn't sound cool at all, man. Like, like they want to secure like radio frequency and microwave. It sounds like total nerd shit, like, but I think I get that sense that he doesn't know what he's gonna do, or maybe he just really is interested in that mission that they want him to work on. But I do think that he's gonna miss that tribe, and miss that community and miss that that sense of purpose, like getting up every day and leading men. So I'm trying to encourage him to find other ways to do that. And he's a newer friend that I've made, but I just we brought him on to the AlphaWave team. So he's gonna be start working with us and doing workshops and stuff like that. And I hope it kind of like sparks an interest in him to like, man, I can still serve this community that I did, for the last 25 years, but do it in a different capacity and maybe be able to reach people in a different way that he's wanted to for a very long time, but just hasn't been able to because he's been at a point of leadership.
Yeah, there's a couple things that came to my mind. Ikigai, like what do you want from what does the world want from you? How can you make money? What are you good at? What do you enjoy?
Hmm.
And you never have to work a day in your life when you figure that out. But tell me more about AlphaWave. Tell me about why that company was started. What do you do? And how does it actually keep drawing you back there just to keep going after it?
So a while back, it's maybe like a year and a half ago. Um, a friend hit me up and he's like, hey, I've been talking with a couple of buddies. He's my friend Jim. And he just retired as a master sergeant. He did like his 20 years and retired out. He was a MARSOC dude for, I don't know, last 10 years or something like that. EOD. Super amazing, man. He actually pulled me aside not that long ago and he's like, hey, I just wanted to share with you, that your grandfather was like the catalyst in me joining the Marine Corps. And I was like, oh, really? Like, what was up with that? And he said we had taken a trip in high school. We were like sitting in youth group one day, and I had moved from like Orange County, LA area up to Northern California in this little podunk ass town called Cobb. And it's in Lake County. It's like I don't even know the population of the town is like in the couple thousands, like not very many people. Um, and we were sitting in youth group and I'm like, hey, you guys want to like fucking bail out of here and go to LA and spend the weekend down there? And me and him, my friend John Paul, like jumped in he had this Ram Charger and we jumped in this Ram Charger and like hauled ass down to LA. Ended up getting stranded down there. Jim had to sell his golf clubs to like get home. But while we were there, we spent, some time with my grandparents. And my grandfather had like this, it's almost like a war room, but it was like every wall was like plastered with, Marine Corps memorabilia, World War I, World War II. There was like a giant photograph of Oliver North in there and General Patton and just all his medals and just different things that he collected from around the world, during his deployments and his traveling. And he, him and Jim had spent some time together that weekend. And he said, that weekend we went to visit your grandfather, I had a conversation with him about, whether or not I should join the Marine Corps. And I said, what did he say? He said, it's not what he said. It was the certainty in which he said it with. And he asked if he could do it all over again, would you re-enlist? Would you join the Marine Corps again? Was it a good move? And my grandfather was like, it was the best thing I ever did in my life. Like hands down, the best thing that I ever did. And with like 100% certainty. So we got home, Jim went and enlisted in the Marine Corps. So fast forward 20 years, Jim hits me up after he retires and he's like, hey, me and a couple buddies are wanting to start like a surf program. And, in the meantime, I had outreach for at-risk youth that I was like taking from inner cities and getting them out surfing, camping, backpacking, and all that sort of stuff. And he's like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain on this and see if you can help us kind of guide us to like a point where we can get doing this with veterans and special needs kids. And it like we had a Zoom call and it was with him and two of his prior teammates that both MARSOC guys. And one was a Raider and the other one was a MARSOC EOD. And I guess they all wore the Raider badge. They were like running around running missions with them. So they really cool dudes, man, just amazing guys. So Jim Keneally was my friend who like initiated the conversation, and then Kelly Grunke was the other guy. I think you met Kelly at one of the retreats, and then Kyle Rogers was the third guy. And man, we just hit it off like first call. It was like, dude, let's do something more. Like instead of like let's start something that you can really serve your community. Like there's a huge need for it. There's all this separation. And it really evolved into like starting a 501c3, coming up with a name for it. We didn't have a name. Like we were just kind of throwing so much shit to the wall. Like, all right, something's going to stick. And then we started talking about alpha brainwaves, right? Like we're trying to promote alpha brainwaves, and I'm like, we want to go surfing, like AlphaWave, like let's call it out. It started out, I think, as like Albatross, which is just because like I wanted to start a surf company called Albatross, so I had like all the domains and everything, and there's some meaning there, like they are the longest flight birds ever, like they can fly farther than any other bird. They stay with the same mate forever, like all this sort of like niche stuff like within the surf community that like implements a good example of what it is to be a good man, a good father. um but then Alpha Wave came up and we're like, dude, that's the name right there, Alpha Wave. And so we ran with that, and it just formed into a 501c3. The guy that was doing our web design for us had a nonprofit, and he actually called me right around the same time. He's like, hey, I'm going to close my nonprofit. Would you like to take it over? And I was like, I don't want to take it over, but I'm trying to start this organization right now. Can we switch like the name of it and all this? So he was like, yeah, absolutely. And we were able to like really expedite that process with just already having like the EIN number and all this shit. We didn't have to apply for it. We just had to jump through a lot of hoops to do the name change. And we formed a 501c3 called AlphaWave Project. And it was, the whole goal is to like put a dent in the suicide number amongst veterans, which is like, if we keep going at this rate it's going at, like there isn't going to be any more any more veterans sooner or later. And then like put a dent in the isolation, like the guys get out of their all across the board. If you did 4 years or you did 20 years, like when you get out, like you just walked away from your tribe, your family. And we wanted to kind of like bring that back together in ways that aren't toxic, like that that aren't like meeting at the bar and fucking going to strip clubs and doing all that shit that these wild boys like to do. We wanted to make it doing activities that promoted alpha brainwaves. So you have beta and theta, right? And that's the two brainwave frequencies that most people live in. Beta being like full fucking red line, and theta being like the calm state. The alpha wave is in between the two. So it made perfect sense. It's not just like we're alphas and we're out surfing. Like it was actually like, hey, we are that. We want to all be alpha males, like, and be a good example of what it is to be an alpha male, but also be in this state of calmness and like present and aware, and not in the red and not in the blue, right? Like right in between. So where like you're fucking fully tuned in. And surfing is one of those activities where you have to be present. Like you cannot be thinking about other shit. You have to be in the moment or you're going to get mopped up, and it could be potentially fatal. Surfing's a high risk sport. A lot of stuff that these dudes are missing that are getting out of like a long career in the military are they're missing that adrenaline, they're missing that fight, and surfing is one that like it's a high stakes activity, but it's also very calming and very peaceful at the same time. So surfing and AlphaWave, it just really clicked. So we did our first event in January of this year, so almost a year. We rented out a surf park in New Jersey called Scoodin Wave Pool, and I think they may have even donated the time to us or given it to us at like a ridiculously discounted rate. And we had about 30 veterans and first responders show up to that first event, and like the news showed up, and a guy from Kelly Slater's Surf Ranch, which is like the world class of like artificial waves, he showed up, and he asked like, how long have you guys been doing this for? And we're like, oh, this is our first event. And he's looking around at like how we had everything prepared. We had Jersey Mike's like donated all the food. We had a non-alcoholic brewery, Good Day Brewery, like donated a bunch of non-alcoholic beers, and we had like a merch table and all this stuff. And he's like, man, it looks like you've been doing this for years, like you guys got it dialed in. And that first event was like a hit, dude. Like it really was. Like you see guys show up and they're like real apprehensive. They've never surfed before. They're around a bunch of people they don't know. They're kind of looking around. It's quiet. We had a Dave Crosby came out and brought his son who's like severely autistic, and they were in the water playing, and we had just a real amazing event. And then after the surfing, dude, it's all smiles. Everybody's smiling. They're all talking. They're sharing stories. Like you could see that community come back together in a way that like these dudes have been lacking, that they've really been missing. Um, so like that first event really set the tone for, all right, we're on to something, like we're making an impact. And it's grown so much. Like we just had an event out in New Jersey, and the size of that one like doubled from the last one. Um, but we've implemented different modalities to our toolbox that, okay, we're not just showing up to do like a fun surfing event. That's part of it. But we're going to do this like tribalism type stuff where we've had breath work coach come in, and we've actually, our team has grown from the three of us to now we have 5 board members and like like 6 or 7 like full-time volunteers that are working with us and just making these events happen. And we're all on a volunteer basis. None of us are taking a salary. Every penny that comes into our organization goes right back into the veteran first responder community. um, but this last event, we had like a jujitsu gym came out and did a jujitsu seminar. We started the day with like early morning sunrise yoga, and then went and surfed, and the weather was like fucking treacherous, dude. It was like 40 knot winds, dude, just ripping winds. Like it was all wind swell and choppy, but the dudes are like, they're stoked, man. They're like out in the water. Like I was walking down the beach trying to take pictures of them, and they're blowing faster than I could like jog. Like they're just like a mile down the beach in like 10 minutes. And we had a guy from the township in Long Beach Island. Shout out to those guys, man. Without the support from that community, this event wouldn't have gone as flawlessly as it did, because we just had They had like traffic control there for us. That we had a police officer on site all day. Um, Lifeguards came and set up on the beach for us. Like we had like tremendous support from the community. Surf instructors from different surf schools came out to help. Um, but that event, so we started the day with yoga, then we did surfing, then we went and did like a jujitsu seminar, and then Mike Hernandez and Dave Brown. Mike Hernandez led a breath work, and then me and David Brown, we did sauna and cold plunge therapy for everybody, so contrast therapy, and then had an amazing dinner. Like somebody catered dinner for us, and we had a dinner at a surf shop, and it just was like same kind of thing where you see all these dudes who are like apprehensive, like, oh, I'm gonna go do yoga. Okay, that's cool. So, but then the guys are after yoga, like the conversations start to happen. And then jujitsu, like people were really into that, like they get a little bit of the combat sports and learn some technique from a dude who's like a pro MMA fighter and a ref for the MMA. And and then in the breath work, like you see some straight murders, like finding their zen, like going in real tense and uptight and like really diving into their bodies and finding that peace. And then in the sauna, like amazing. It's like the facade comes off completely. It's 200 degrees. You're sweating your ass off. It's hot as shit. You got guy pouring water on the rocks, and it's really getting hot, and the walls start to come down, the barriers start to come off, and you see the real authentic people that you're working with, that you're getting to spend time with, and some amazing conversations happen in the sauna where people are talking about their struggles, they're talking about their path of healing, they're sharing tools, um and that's the medicine, right? Is like to be vulnerable, and the sauna for some reason makes people extremely vulnerable because I feel like you're so focused on how fucking hot it is that you can't fake it anymore. So the true self comes out, and you start to shed layers, and people are shedding tears and talking about being suicidal and their path through healing, whether it be therapy or psychedelics or any of that sort of stuff. Um and then the cold plunge, the contrast therapy is just really good for mental health, period. So that was kind of that last event wrapped up in a nutshell. And it's just really evolved to where we're working with Intrepid Spirits. We get the guys from the TBI clinic at Intrepid Spirits, and we get to take them, whether it's beekeeping or fishing. But lately it's been the contrast therapy. So they'll pick up the Intrepid Spirits dudes, or they'll show up at a firehouse on Lejeune, and then you combine the firefighters with the soft guys that are running through that TBI clinic, and do the same kind of routine we did in New Jersey, where it's breath work, sauna, cold plunge, but all with intention, right? It's not like, hey, we're going to show up and do a breathing exercise and then cold plunge and whatever. Like it's intentional, and the same thing happens. The layers start to come off. Guys are really apprehensive when they get there, and then they go through the workshop, and the conversations start happening, and they get vulnerable, and they start sharing about their struggles and their healing. And that's got such good traction that like they're like almost demanding us to be there. So like the firefighters are pulling guys off of other stations, off their trucks, to meet at a firehouse, to where we had one sauna going, and on our last workshop, the guys had two saunas going. So we got an amazing sponsor from North Shore Sauna Company. The guy who runs it is a retired Army veteran and psychologist, and he started a sauna company. So they've been amazing, like selling us their saunas at cost. We ended up picking up 5 saunas. So I have one out here on the West Coast. So I'm about to start doing work with guys at Buell Air Force Base. And then I have a meeting coming up with the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, so CDCR. And I got to go tour Folsom State Prison and New Folsom Prison. So one's a level 2 yard and one's a level 4 yard. And they want us to come up with like a specific workshop just for corrections officers to be able to participate in. And then working with fire departments out here and first responders, so the paramedics, EMTs, and stuff. Just going, we just show up to the firehouse, no charge to them, run them through a breath work, and then do the contrast therapy, and then really able to like help different veterans in needs. One of my close friends is a retired Marine who's battling brain cancer, and we're able to get him like hyperbaric therapy, and support him on his healing journey. Or another guy we know has got a severely autistic son who was abused on a military base at a daycare and now has like severe PTSD with severe autism, and their family's just really struggling. And we were just able to do a fundraiser for him and raise a bunch of money so that we could send his family on kind of a little getaway, and so they can detox their kid from like heavy metals and parasites that they just can't do on their own because financially it's not in their cards. They're doing everything they can to just barely get by, and the struggles that they have are like out of this world, and um so we're able to really pour into the veteran first responder community with people's generous donations. It's like every penny that has gone into our nonprofit goes right back into the community. And eventually when we start getting, more grant money and stuff from different entities, hopefully someday it can be a way that we can all support our families with. But right now it's better than that. It just fills our cups up like so high. Like after these events, you can just see that like we have a group meeting and do a board meeting, and everybody's just like overflowing with gratitude for just being able to get to serve that community in the way that we do. So Alpha Wave's been huge for me. It's really like, the guys I work with, I was for a while the only civilian on the team, and we just brought one more on. But working with these guys that they've all been in leadership. Everybody's like a master sergeant up, and like the caliber of man that I've got to like go through this with has really like forced me to level up in ways that I didn't think I would ever. So it's been amazing. And it all stemmed from a conversation my grandfather had 20 years ago with a friend.
That's sick, man. I was thinking about the sweat lodges, or actually the saunas. The Native Americans over here use sweat lodges
Hmm.
for the same thing. The hyperbaric chamber. I was actually talking to William Person. He did 9 years as a bobsledder, and he was talking about all the G's that they would be pulling and all the micro tears in the brain. The how hyperbaric chamber has helped out a lot of them. I was talking to somebody else about a few other areas where, like, first responders, how they are kind of looked over because this is every day, day in and day out, and how come they have high such rates of uh, said cheating, but infidelity and or actually substance abuse about actually being seen and heard. And I'm extremely happy that you're not just only focusing on veterans, but first responders and people with disabilities, because a lot of these individuals, they suffer in silence. And it's crazy about how we don't humanize these individuals, like from police officers to EMT to firefighters, where they are constantly, they don't know what kind of call they're going to get. They don't know what they're going to show up to. They don't know what person, or if it's a like an EMT, are they gonna be tracheing somebody? Are they gonna be like carrying somebody dead? Or are they gonna be getting guys stuck to a toilet bowl? Who knows? Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just taking a breath.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about how much these people are uncertain. Very similar to people that are veterans. They're looking at the world from a different eyes, a different, it's just easy to classify it like the 1% of the population, but how everybody else needs to come together as a tribe. I remember with Team Red, White, and Blue, I used to really, really like them, and at least on Long Island, it was about the friends and the families that have been impacted by a person's mental illness. And healing people doesn't just stop with the person, but it's actually the community accepting the individual back into the tribe and understanding that they're going to have a different narrative. So I love what you're doing over there.
Yeah, thanks, man. There's a huge stigma around like uh these people that like that they suffering alone, right? That they're all alone and they're suffering. And it's just not true at all. You know, their wives are suffering, their parents are suffering, their kids are suffering, their friends are suffering. You know, to watch people go down these rabbit holes of depression and substance abuse and like they're they may feel alone, like nobody gets it, but everybody in their close circle is suffering right alongside with them, you know. And first responders and like law enforcement, they don't get any decompression, right? They, work a long shift, but most of them are working 12-hour shifts. Um, and they get to go home. Sometimes maybe they'll take their uniform off at the office or at the station, and other times they're taking it off at home. So they don't even get a chance to, there's no decompression, it's rinse and repeat every day. And like you said, they could be dealing with, a guy stuck on a toilet or a dead baby in a car accident or a domestic violence case that, somebody just beat the fuck out of their wife and kid and then they got to go to the next call and the next call and the next call. And it's kind of like you guys, being in the military and being in combat, like your buddy gets killed next to you, you don't have time to mourn that guy. Like if you take time to sit and cry for Charlie, like you might be dead yourself. Charlie was probably a bad name to pick.
Well, Viacom, and they used to use Charlie's.
Yeah.
But no, you're 100% right. So one of the things they teach you about when you're clearing houses is that if if somebody gets shot, you keep clearing the house and then you come back for the person. You have to be disconnected enough emotionally from the people that you really love in a very friendship, brotherly, or sisterly love, depending on who's with you. You go there, you continue to clear, and then you come back. Otherwise, if you tend to care, you become a bigger silhouette, a nice target. Hence why in the military we use silhouette targets instead of just circle targets to be able to dehumanize the where we're putting rounds on paint. So it's just a very interesting thing. So yeah,
Yeah, so being able to bring tools, like when we do these workshops, we're not just going and showing up and then leaving, like we're building community. There's an open line of communication now, but we're also giving them tools that they can do. Like everybody can do breath work, and they see the results they get from it like almost instantly. And it's something that they can take home and do on the drive home from work from a hard day or do as a family or whatever, just we're planting seeds really just kind of all over.
have you guys ever thought about doing QPR training as well with these people or doing assist or psych armor?
Uh,
And most of the stuff
I don't know
is
what that
actually
is.
so QPR is question, persuade, not even response, but it's actually relocate. So, hence, when you're with the other people and they're actually taking care of the stuff emotionally, they're going to know other people has been impacted, but they're not might be open to breath work or yoga or jujitsu or surfing or rock climbing, whatever somatic sense to be able to bring them back into the world. Like assist is the same thing. It's advanced suicide intervention training. Psych armor is also free as well. And helping people when they're actually introduced into other individuals, saying, "Hey, dude, I'm struggling." Great. Tell me more. What's going on? And you start questioning them. You start persuading them, and then you start actually helping them to get to the additional services instead of them being isolated and learning how to ask these questions. I'm just curious if you guys ever thought about that.
No, but I'm like super interested. And it's probably something that we do. Like I notice all the time, like people like especially doing like the therapeutic type stuff with people and they're like, "Oh, do you do parts work?" And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And then they describe it, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely do that. I didn't know there was a name for it. It's just something that like like I implement, maybe because I learned it in therapy myself or whatever. But yeah, so we definitely, I'm always open to more avenues of education, more tools for my toolbox. So yeah, whatever info you have on that, dude, please send it my way.
Yeah, this is the first time I'm gonna do this, but I'm gonna try this real quick. So I don't know if you can see this on the screen. So it says, question, persuade, refer, suicide prevention, and mental health intervention in the context QPR is an emergency intervention designed to interrupt a suicidal crisis. The chain of survival is It is a key component of a chain of survival for suicide prevention. The how to question, ask direct questions about suicide to recognize the crisis, persuade the person to stay alive and get help, refer them to appropriate professional care.
Yeah, and
And
that's kind of my job at AlphaWave. My title is the director of healing services. So when people reach out and they're in that category, maybe they're not suicidal, but I've had some people that I've worked with over the last year that have been suicidal. It's my job to like do an assessment with them, like get them on a call, like see what they're dealing with, what their struggles are, the kind of things that they're into, things that bring them joy, and then try to find, if I can't help them myself, I will reach out and to our network and find something for them, something that can really help them out. So maybe it's a certain therapist or a rehab center or a TBI clinic or something like that. So I kind of like, I'm like, I don't even know how you would describe it other than maybe just the way I did, just kind of like really getting to know people in a kind of a short period of time, and then trying to find them the best treatment possible for what they're dealing with.
and not to put you on the spot, and if you want to, I can always just cut this next part out, but would you ever be interested with you and a couple of people on the board just to do a conversation about how they've seen Alpha Wave impact people's lives, and not only just their lives, but their families' lives as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, because I did something for horse therapy, equine therapy, and they were having a show over here in Missoula, over in Montana. And when the people listen to it, it's just about stirring up the conversation about different alternatives of therapy because you probably know much about horses, but some people might not. You have to lower your energy to be able to meet theirs because they're prey animals or flight animals. And being able to sit with them in a type of discomfort and emotion, be able to, okay, I could trust you. You can kill me at anything you want to. But at the same time, I'm opening myself up to a vulnerable. And sometimes it's difficult to open up to a person, but they were able to express this a lot better than I can. And I would love to be able to sit down with a few of you guys, do a thing about Alpha Wave and what have you seen? How has it impacted the relationship? Because even going back to earlier about how you had to change or you started changing to be able to love your wife deeply. And then also even your grandfather, your grandmother said, "Hey, you're either gonna stop drinking or we're gonna be done." And at the same time, it's like, okay, cool. How do we actually be able to acknowledge this?
Yeah, I've gotten like with the work that I do, like with psychedelics and stuff, and the trauma work that I'm so lucky to be able to do with people. I've gotten like letters from wives, like, thank you so much. My husband came back the man I fell in love with 15 years ago, things of that sort. I just got we got an email from a fire chief. I'll read it to you actually really quick. And he talks about the impacts that he has seen. Let me just find it. And it's really, it's profound. Like you only get to see what we see when we're there, right?
Mhm.
But you don't see what happens after we pack up our shop and leave. It's like so here's what he says. The AlphaWave Project has been a game changer for my firefighters. Through breathing exercises, guided recovery sessions, and mindfulness practices, My team has gained powerful tools to handle stress, sharpen focus, and restore balance. I've seen them use these skills after tough calls, during high pressure training, and even in their personal lives. Proving the impact goes well beyond the firehouse. It strengthens their mind, body, and spirit, helping them stay resilient in a profession that demands so much. Kelly and his team have been amazing, leading us with patience, passion, and care. They're truly doing God's work. This program is more than training, it's a lifeline for our people and an investment for the future of the fire service. Alex Rivera, Fire Chief, USMC. So that's from the fire chief at Camp Lejeune, who like heads, I think, 8 stations out there. So like it was really cool to see that and know that it didn't just stop when we left, it continued on. So it's just like planting those seeds and getting those guys to implement that sort of stuff, it's like been really, really awesome. I had a call with a guy the other day. I was in a call, like a coaching group, with this dude, and he's a police officer in New Jersey, and he had a call, was a domestic dispute, where her husband beat up the mom, and there was like a 7-year-old kid that kind of saw it all happen. And we had talked in the call about the importance of journaling, and how it's like really important to journal and get stuff off your head if you don't have an outlet for it. And he came from an abusive family, and that call put him, he's like, all I saw was my 7-year-old self, in that room and trying to comfort this kid. And he's like, all I wanted to do was go put hands on the father, like being in uniform, like my emotions don't stop there. I wanted to hurt this guy. um and instead of like compartmentalizing that and getting back to work, he's like, I took my break, I went in my car and I journaled about it. And he's like, and those feelings went away. And I'm like, man, that's really amazing, because not only did you journal about it, you processed it. Your journaling was part of the process of like really going through the emotions, how it made you feel, what'd you learn, like maybe what are you a little bit grateful for from the experience. I don't know necessarily what he wrote and what he wrote about, but planting that seed, he took it, and he went and journaled about that incident to where it didn't bother him anymore. And it was like really cool to see, like, man, you took action, you didn't compartmentalize that and just stick it in your closet to where it can come back and haunt you later. You 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 took action right away, and you processed that event, and now it's dust in the wind. So like seeing these guys not just do it when we're there in the workshops, but to actually implement it, you know really quickly. Like it was the next week we had a call, and he shared that he did that instead of like going to the bottle or whatever he would normally do when he got home.
Dude, it's actually, I love it, man. I love it. And the other part, and now when I was listening to you talk, it's really trying to break down those boundaries or barriers, not boundaries, but barriers in people's lives, because you're a very masculine dude. Even when I was hanging out with you for a bit, I saw your energy. You're just a good dude, and you're able to give confidence to other men to be able to get into their emotions, to be able to feel their emotions and allow them not to feel like sissies or what the words that we used to use back in the day, but to actually realize this is one of the better ways to connect to yourself, connect to your loved ones, and actually be more of a human. So I appreciate everything that you continuously do for people.
Thanks, man. I think that even stems from my grandfather. He was a big hardcore dude, but he was a crybaby, man. Like he was always, crying at weddings, crying at movies, listen to music that would strike emotions and bring tears to his eyes. Like he was never afraid to show that soft side of him, and I really admired that about him, because he's someone you always looked up to. And to see him like show that like soft, um vulnerable side of him and not be ashamed of it, was like something that, like, I'm a crybaby too, man. Like movies, songs, like I just like it gets me. And I think that there's healing in that, and letting them there. I know that there's healing in that, and letting those emotions out. If you look at like a toddler, for example, um, they can have, they'll be happy. Then you take a toy away from them or tell them no about something, and they lose their shit, dude. It's the worst thing in the world. They throw a fucking tantrum. They stomp their feet. They cry. They yell. They do all that stuff. And then 10 minutes later, they're the happiest kid in the world again because they allowed that energy to get out. At a certain point in life, it becomes unacceptable for that child to act that way anymore, and it carries on through adulthood. And I think that's where depression and anxiety and stuff all stem from, not being able to let those negative emotions out, or those sad emotions out. Like, it's unacceptable to cry, or it's unacceptable to like raise your voice or yell or whatever. And I think that I know that is where a lot of these, symptoms of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, substance abuse, like it stems from, is from like sticking those emotions down, and like choking it up. And the military is conditions you for that. You can't go into mental health after deployment and tell them how you really feel. You have to like fill them full of bullshit. I'm fine. I'm good, because you want to get back to work. If you're honest with them, there's consequences.
So I was on my way to BAH right after. So BAH is where our medical providers are over, and we came back from Iraq, and this is the first time I came back from Iraq, and I was in Okinawa, and I was going to do a check-in with them, and so I answered all the questions honestly too, and I actually didn't even know how to answer the questions, but on my way going from my shop to BAH, I heard doop, and I dove into the ground, and I didn't even realize that was actually a signal to me. So you talk about like when you first come back, you don't even realize it. Here, doop. To some people, that doesn't sound like anything, but to me, that sounds like a 40 mic, or it sounds like something about to go off, and I'm waiting to hear a whistle. And yeah, I dove into the ground and I just started wiping my legs off, and I'm like, um, should I tell somebody about this? I kind of feel simple right now. I don't know how to actually say. I feel dumb. Then all of a sudden, years later, I think about this and I'm like, if anybody actually did see me do that, they'd probably been like, "Oh, I understand what's going on." But at the time, we didn't have the communication. So think about trying to explain to a person that you don't even have the communication or wherewithal of what's actually really happening inside your body, where you're on extreme autonomy. Like your body is just working to what it needs to do to be able to keep you in survival mode, but you're not able to be able to break down a dialogue to a person where most of the people I've worked with, we only had high school like diplomas. We come from areas that we don't even know how to articulate it. So why I'm extremely grateful for people like yourself is you're giving words to emotions, you're giving sensations, you're allowing people to have that new experiences, to be able to be present. Breath work, extremely helpful. Yoga, you're starting to feel where all the trauma is stuck inside your body. You're able to sit, you're using your somatic sense. That's why grounding is so huge, like the touch, but really touch is somatic and kinesis. And when you're just able to help people realize that, okay, I just had another trauma response. I saw myself at 7 years old thinking about how I was when my dad did this to my mom. You're allowing grown ass men to be able to say, and women, to be able to say, hey, I felt X, Y, and Z. Is this normal? Where even sometimes going to a therapist, it kind of is like, are they going to judge me? They're coming from a place of strength. They're coming from a place of privilege. And you give that type of, again, like I said, give that people the option to be able to be.
Yeah, and then being from outside of the community as well, like it allows them to, with active duty guys that I get to talk with, or current law enforcement, people who still have their jobs. Like, I'm not gonna fucking snitch them out, right? Unless they're like a potentially harmful to somebody else, you know? Like, I'm not I'm not saying anything to anybody, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not part of the VA, I'm not part of mental health within the corrections departments or anything like that. So it allows them opportunity to like really tell me the shit that's going on, you know, and then not being a veteran, like there's no pissing contest ever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's trying to one up me on rank or size me up on what I did in my past. Like, there's none of that. So I think it really allows me a special place there, knowing that I come from a traumatic background. Yeah, it wasn't from combat, but the results of the shit were the same, right? And I healed from it. So it allows them to be a little more open, a little more vulnerable with me because there is no consequence, right?
So I do, for sake of time, I do need to get off soon, but there's a couple of things I wanted you to bring up.
Yeah.
How could they get in contact with AlphaWave?
It's easy, alphawaveproject.org. And then the Instagram, I can text it to you. Maybe you can put it in the show notes. That would probably be easiest. And then yeah, so the website that you can email us there. We're alphawave_project on Instagram. I think we have a Facebook page. Um, and then if you want to put my phone number or email in there, it's fine too. It's paul@alphawaveproject.org.
The other question I have too is that, so say if somebody wanted to have help with your coaching, how would they get in touch with you for coaching if you're interested?
They can email me or just, call me, like however. So my coaching work is separate from Alpha Wave. Um, because I work with psychedelics and plant medicine, we kind of keep those two things separate. But we do sponsor people to get that type of healing. So if there's people that can't afford it, they could reach out through Alpha Wave and get sponsorship to do that type of work, whether it's with me or somebody else. Like we're not we're not biased, right? I'm not here to take everybody that comes across my desk, like if I don't feel that I'm a good fit for somebody or they might get better treatment with the different medicine that I don't work with, um then we're more than happy to like put them on track to someplace to get them to a point where they can get the healing that they deserve. But yeah, I can give you all that info and you could throw it in the show notes.
Appreciate that, 'cause even just parroting to something you said last time we sat down and talked, you had a person that helped you out with the plant medicine, and you she was like, she gave you the insight, but since she knew you personally, she felt like she was not a good fit, but she introduced you to somebody else. And that's one of the things I admire about people like yourself and individuals that are like, hey, I want to see you get better, but our relationship will impede that type of growth. And being able to, good.
No, no, it can for sure. I don't rule it out if somebody's a friend and they want to work with me. It's all good. I had an experience in a session with a friend, and he was opening up about some stuff, and we were talking about a friend that committed suicide. And he said in there, like, so and so had to die. Kyle had to die. And I knew Kyle as well. And I said, no, he didn't. Kyle didn't have to die. And later he's like, he pulled me aside, a while later, and he's like, hey, man, like, you shouldn't have said that. Like, I was dealing with my shit and trying to rationalize Kyle's death, and you had your opinion on it. So that's kind of where it can muddy the waters working with friends, where it's like, I definitely should have let him run with it, but it caught me to a point where I'm like, man, Kyle didn't die. I was one of the last people to fucking talk to him on the phone, or actually on a FaceTime. And, I asked this guy, like, hey, man, are you good? Like, you seem like you're ready to, like, you're burning out. And his exact words are, I'm great. I'm better than ever, actually. And he fucking hung himself that night. So, when my friend in this MDMA session that was really powerful and impactful in so many ways, when he brought up Kyle, I had emotion tied to that experience in my own mind. And I brought that into the medicine space where I should have, yeah, I didn't even have time to think. It was more reaction than anything. But that's where it can kind of muddy the waters of like working with friends, or there's stuff that they don't want you to know about them. And it doesn't allow them to be fully vulnerable because they don't want you to know their deep, dark secrets. And that's totally appropriate. That should be dealt with somebody that they don't know from outside their circle. So I try to not work with people who I have a personal relationship with. Excuse me. Oftentimes after doing coaching work um and then doing the plant medicine, my clients become really close friends, and that's totally acceptable in my book, like it doesn't always happen that way. A lot of people I work with I never talk to again, or I'll hear from them once a year. They just kind of check in. But I've made some really close friends from people who I've met and started our relationship as a client.
Yeah. Like, I kind of in an indirect way was one of your clients when we first started off when you were co-facilitating. And I
Yeah,
really do value our relationship, and I'm looking forward to linking up with you again, man.
yeah, for
Paul,
sure.
dude, I really appreciate you, man. I love your energy.
Thanks, Will.
Such a great dude, man.
Thanks, man. You as well. It's nice to be seen.
Well, it's easy to see you, dude, even though you're a little guy.
I'm not little, dude. I'm big. I'm putting on weight. I was like, dude, I was at the gym a few months ago and I like stepped on the scale and I was like, yo, this thing is broken, dude. There's no way I weigh this much. I was like barely 150 pounds. I'm like, what the fuck, man? So I've been really like smashing food and been working out more and just trying to get back up there. Dave, one of our board members called me little bit. And I was like, no, dude, that's not happening. And then Jared, like, when he answers the phone, he's like, "What's up, little dog?" I'm like, dude, no, I'm not that little, man. I'll fuck you up, bro. Like, I'm Sparky. But yeah, my niece was over last night. We had like a family dinner and she's taller than me. I'm only 5'10". She's like 5'11". I'm just like, oh my gosh, what the heck? I'm a little guy.
No, Paul, you got like they say, it's not the fight, it's not the size of the dog, but it's the fight of the dog inside the.
Yeah.
But
So,
but anyways, I'll catch up with you soon. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
all right, brother. Have a good day, man.
You too.
Later.